the world of contemporary geopolitics, a staunch belief of conflict between two superpowers is always floating. For the recent years post 1962 betrayal by China, the narrative of India and China engaging in a full-scale war is always a possibility. But what if we step back from the breaking news and noises and view the board through the grand strategy? We will then encounter a profound paradox. The two most populous countries, India and China, are the twin engines of the 21st century. They command nearly 36% of the global population, and yet both the countries are stuck in a classic security dilemma, allocating billions of dollars on defense spending, intellectual capital, and hundreds and thousands of troops in the Himalayan border. Today we pitch an opinionated, realistic, and unpopular idea that India and China must be friends. Not because it feels good and not to fit in, but instead taking actions based on hard facts. Hi, I'm Shreya and welcome to our global analytical show, The Strategist. Let's get started. In the current trajectory, two emerging superpowers, India and China, are constantly distracted to compete with each other, which acts as a waste of money. For India to attain its dream of becoming a fully developed economy by 2047, and for China to overcome the hurdle of transitioning into a high-income state while overcoming the Western containment, cooperation is not a luxury, it's a necessity. To understand why there is a huge scope of possible friendship between the two nations, we need to unlearn the recent biased post-1962 era. For over a period of 1,000 years, the relationship between the two civilizations was not defined by friction but a seamless cooperation and understanding. As Harvard economist and historian Amartya Sen elegantly documented in his work The Argumentative Indian, that the flow of knowledge along the Silk Route was profoundly bidirectional. Between the 1st and the 7th century CE, Indian Buddhism completely reshaped the Chinese philosophical cosmos. Monks like Xunjiang and Faxian braved trenches high-altitude terrain not to conquer territory but to acquire knowledge at the ancient University of Nalanda. Indian advancement in mathematics, medicine and astronomy quietly integrated into the Chinese society. Historically, our baseline is one of cultural confluence, not political conflict. When modern architects emerged, they incorporated newly independent nations, their belief with the traditional, historically rooted designs. Back in 1954, New Delhi and Beijing signed the Panchsheel, the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which also gave rise to the feeling of Hindi-Chini Bhai. But this idealistic relationship between the two soon collapsed due to the poorly drawn borders by the British Empire, leading to a catastrophic War of October 1962. The 1962 war acted less like a conflict but more like a traumatic scar that left the Indian strategic psyche in dismay. For decades, the ghost of 1962 has haunted every diplomatic table, convincing both sides that any gain for one must inherently mean an absolute loss for the other. Yet, true strategists know that the statecraft is driven by practicality and not by grudge holding. Yet, both the countries have historically tried to regain stability. Look at the December 1988 Rajiv Gandhi's visit to Beijing. It was during this pivotal meeting that the paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, offered a piece of timeless wisdom that remains the ultimate blueprint for India-China relation. Deng noted that the upcoming century would be the Asian century if India and China cooperated. He famously suggested the future generation could find a solution to the border issue while the current generation focuses on economic development and mutual cooperation. This meeting resulted in a fruitful result and yielded border management agreements being signed between the two states in 1993 and 1996. This kept the nation peacefully coexisting without a single shot being fired for nearly 2 decades. Even bilateral trade exploded over $100 billion annually. When the Doklam standoff of 2017 threatened to spark a wider conflagration, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping recognized the abyss they were staring into. The response? The 2018 Wuhan and 2019 Mamallapuram informal summit. These were not mere photo opportunities, but the choice of Mamallapuram, an ancient Pallava port city that historically traded with China's Yuan dynasty, was deeply symbolic. It was a deliberate elite level signal to the world that we are too big, too old, and too powerful to let tactical border disputes derail our historical trajectory. Even during the period of the Galwan crisis in 2020, look at the underlying reality. While popular media channels and agencies called it a total economic boycott, the data tells a different story. Bilateral trade has consistently broken records during the period of time, proving the Asian economy is structurally interdependent. You cannot easily decouple two giants who share a single economic ecosystem. So let's address the question: why the present-day rivals actively pursue a propitiation? The answer is hidden in three distinct strategies. First, let's look at the macroeconomics aspect. India possesses a demographically vibrant, consumption-driven economy with a huge software, service, pharmaceutical market. China, on the other hand, is the undisputed manufacturing, logistic, and hardware capital of the world. A geopolitical freeze forces India to look for alternative supply chains while not being able to utilize the Chinese market. An Indo-China trade and economic corridor would create a great alternative to the Western Bloc, cutting down the transactional cost, time duration, and generating wealth creation. Second, both nations have from time immemorial wanted a multipolar world order. For a century, all the great organizations like the World Bank, the IMF, UN Security Council has been dominated by the Western Bloc. But with the formation of BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, India and China found themselves countering the West and promoting the global South. When New Delhi and Beijing fight, the West arbitrates. When New Delhi and Beijing agrees, they set the global agenda. Third, the future can be rewritten. With India's top software engineering talents and human resource merged with China's capacity of scaling hardware and manufacturing infrastructure, Asia can lead the fourth industrial revolution. The next decade is of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, green hydrogen, and advanced semiconductor manufacturing, where collaboration between the two is highly beneficial. Although, let's look at the realistic obstacles. A real analysis demands an overall perspective of the situation, hence why this friendship is difficult to sustain. The structural imbalance between India and China is entirely real. India views China's closeness with Pakistan as a trigger and a security threat, while China views India's growing closeness with Quad alongside the US, Japan, and Australia as an attempt to its encirclement. China must recognize that a powerful, independent India is a historical inevitability, and treating New Delhi as a second power or a Western proxy is a profound miscalculation. While current friction between India and China are a desirable situation for several capitals, foremost among them is Islamabad. Pakistan's contemporary grand strategy is to prove as a two-front threat to India in the long run. By positioning itself as China's all-weather friend and a geostrategic hub for the multi-billion-dollar China-Pakistan economic corridor, Pakistan derives immense leverage, military hardware, and diplomatic cover from Beijing. A genuine friendship between India and China would mean neutralizing these benefits from China. Next comes the United States, who would be the next in line to be anxious if there is a friendship between India and China. While America always feared a hot war in the Himalayan region that could destabilize the global market and trigger a nuclear escalation, America's post-Cold War era always attempted to stop any sort of emergence of alternative dominant groups of friendship or a bloc. An Indo-China partnership would mean an emerging threat and de-dollarization of the Western-led institutions. The boundary dispute between India and China remains a big hurdle for any progressive thinking towards a growing proximity in a shifting multipolar world. And the onus largely remains on China, as territorial expansionism cannot be tolerated in a nationalistic India, and China has to address the Indian concern. But if India-China remains locked in personal rivalry, they will successfully exhaust each other and their resources by utilizing each other's potential for their benefit. But despite all these hurdles, if India and China stay firm upon starting and maintaining this friendship, the global balance of power shifts towards the south. The choice before New Delhi and Beijing is stark. They can either remain prisoners of their past mistakes or they can become the primary architects of their shared future. History is watching. That is all for today's episode of The Strategist. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your analytical insights in the comment below, and we will see you in the next video. Until then, I'm Shreya signing off.